Hello, Mark Sabatella here with the Mastering MuseScore School. In this video, we're going to take a look at the arrangement that Lady Gaga sang of the Star-Spangled Banner at Joe Biden's inauguration. This has really had a lot of comments, a lot of people talking about this arrangement and her performance. It's a really fascinating arrangement that I want to be able to talk about. And the first thing I want to do is acknowledge that there are a lot of other people out there doing their analysis, and there's a lot to learn from a lot of people. And I would be completely remiss if I did not point you to Adam Neely, who does a fantastic job. He had his video out within 24 hours. It's a great analysis of a lot of things that are going on. What I think I'm going to be focusing on is probably a little more about the harmony, so that people who maybe aren't really familiar with some of the terms that Adam uses can become familiar with some of these things. And also, there's a few places where maybe we mostly have the same analysis, but there's a few places where I'll want to point out things that maybe I'm hearing something a little differently. And I just have my own take on things. But Adam has a fantastic video, and just the production quality of what Adam does is just fabulous. So anyhow, the arrangement here is, this is my adaptation. This is my attempt to take what Lady Gaga sang, and the arrangement, which is by Michael Bearden, her music director. And this arrangement here I have reduced down to a lead sheet, but of course it was originally done for a larger ensemble. Now I'm going to assume that you can go and find the recording yourself, but I'm going to play just a little bit just so we all know what we're talking about. Let me flip over to where she is, and we're just going to hear the beginning of this thing, and maybe I'll skip around a little bit as we go. Okay, I stopped it there, and you saw me conducting in there. The point is, it is in 4/4, and this is one of the first things that everyone comments about this piece. It's not that unusual to take a piece, because if you don't know the Star-Spangled Banner, if you're not from this country, then you might not recognize that that's an unusual thing in itself. But yes, this piece is normally in 3. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn? That's how it usually goes. But what they have done in this arrangement is they've moved it into 4/4. Oh, say, can you see? It's basically just a matter of lengthening the first note of every measure. This is not that unusual of a thing, really. First of all, anytime anyone does this in sort of a pop kind of vein, and everyone always points to the Whitney Houston version as a point of reference. So by all means, go look that up. And this is in 4, but a lot of people do this song in 4. And really, in the pop and jazz world, it's very common to take songs that were originally in 3/4, like Broadway show tunes and so forth, and turn them into 4 so they fit more typical pop or jazz kinds of rhythms. And yet, that was not at all pop or jazz, right? I mean, Lady Gaga's a pop singer, but that was a pretty straight, classical march-like kind of harmonization and orchestration. Everything about it is very straight. And to me, that was the thing that was the most remarkable about this. How much was going on in the arrangement to make it interesting without turning it into this thing that a lot of pop singers do when they do this song, of adding all these melismas and, turning it into sort of a gospel showcasey sort of a thing. That is not what's happening here. It's a really very straight, kind of respectful to the original character of the piece arrangement, but with so many interesting twists. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. So if we look at this, I'm just going to talk about it in terms of what's actually going on harmonically and rhythmically. And if we need to listen to little fragments of her singing it to make a point, I'll try to get that happening. I also want to give a shout out to Patricia Willinga, who was the first person I saw who had actually transcribed the melody and started talking about the time signature changes. And I took her chart, I made some changes to it, and I'll talk about where I made changes and why. But then I went and added my chords, which also Adam added his own chords. And again, I'll talk about where mine maybe differ from Adam's. In this case, I actually got my chords before Adam posted his video, so it's not that I saw his and changed them. I did my own. So it starts off with an introduction here. We're just going to listen to MuseScore's playback. It's not as exciting as the original, but it allows me to make points really easily. So I'll break it down kind of phrase by phrase. We have that introduction that's all based on a 5 chord resolving to 1. D flat 7 going to G flat with a suspension. And you will see that Michael Bearden loves this suspension, this 5 chord with a 4th in it, D flat 7 sus resolving to D flat 7. He loves that sound as much as I do and uses it about the same way as I do. In fact, everything about this arrangement, there's so many things he does that I'm going to just say, wow, I would have done the same, or I feel like this is the kind of arrangement I would aspire to write myself, which is one reason it's so fascinating to me. So he has that going on, but it is in the key of G flat, which is another noteworthy thing only when you see it or try to transcribe it. When you listen to it, unless you have perfect pitch, you wouldn't think G flat's a thing. But it does mean that it's a little awkward seeing some of the chords we're going to be seeing here. We're going to see some C flats. We're going to see a couple double flats, and get over it is all I say. G flat is a key. It would not look any better in F sharp. It definitely would not. But yeah, we could transpose it to G for the sake of analysis, but no, let's deal with it, right? Let's deal with it in G flat. So we have that 1 chord, and now this is a real typical device. We have G flat, and then we're trying to get to this 6th chord here, E flat, and it's just a diatonic walk down. G flat, walking down, the bass line goes G flat, F, E flat, and we put that 5 chord there, D flat with the F in the bass, going to E flat. This is just a super common kind of classical type of progression. And that sets the whole tone for what's happening here. He's writing a chorale. He's writing something that's going to feel very, very much in the style of how Bach wrote chorales, or all the traditional hymns from the Protestant church and so forth, have all the same type of motions. He's going to go beyond that, but he is definitely setting the stage as that is our expectation. I'm not going to worry about what the original chords were for this so much. I will just say that, yeah, that 6th chord, everything that we're hearing so far is pretty typical. It's going to start varying more as we get further along. All right, so we've arrived on that 6th chord, that E flat minor. So here we had the B flat 7 going back to E flat minor. He wanted to come back to E flat minor, but he didn't want to just stay on E flat minor the whole time, right? So we give that E flat minor its own 5 chord. That's a secondary dominant, and it's the most common type of chord outside the key there is, right? B flat 7 has a D natural in it that is not in our key, because our key is all full of flats, right? B flat 7 has a D natural in it, and in fact it's there in the bass. And it's leading to E flat minor. It's like the 5 chord in the key of E flat minor, right? So a secondary dominant. I've explained it once, now I'm just going to refer to that term. By the way, if terms like secondary dominant and so forth are not already comfortable for you, my online course, Harmony and Chord Progressions, got to give you the little commercial there, is where you can learn all about that stuff in like really incredible detail. Okay, so we use that secondary dominant to come back to E flat, and he uses another inversion here. At least I'm hearing the inversion. I'm listening through headphones here, but we're listening to YouTube video that was not like a professional recording. I can't always be picking out the bass. And of course, it's not like a jazz or pop thing where there's a bass player, right? It's a tuba or something like that playing bass, and maybe we're not always hearing a bass note. So my brain is having to fill in some things. So there's occasionally places where I'm reading between the lines to tell you what I think the bass note is, or to tell you whether a chord has a seventh or whether it's just a triad. Those distinctions, if someone wants to say, no, 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 that really didn't have that note in the bass, or that seventh wasn't really in that chord, I will grant you that. I will not put up a fight over any of those things if you hear it differently. All right, so now we're on that sixth chord. We're trying to get to 5, so 6, 2, 5 is what we're going to do. That's the circle of fifths, right? 6, E flat minor, and then 2, A flat. Here again, 2 would normally be a minor chord, A flat minor, but we're using a secondary dominant to get to the A flat. 6, 2 as a dominant, 5. And again, he's giving us this sus thing twice, right? That's, that A flat 7 sus resolving to A flat 7, and then D flat 7 sus resolving to D flat. He just loves that sound, so do I. And then we get this little interesting little rhythmic thing. So bum 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 bum, that kind of rhythm, dotted, it's basically 2 dotted quarters and a quarter within this 4/4 measure. This is a really common rhythm in like a lot of Latin, like, Afro-Cuban and Brazilian, that kind of music, to have those sorts of rhythms. It's not like that's the only place they come from, but it's a little bit out of keeping with the rest of the arrangement. So that's like your first real clue, because even that secondary dominant, everything about this, that C natural in the melody on Early Light, it pretty much requires the use of that secondary dominant there. So pretty much everything we've heard up until that point is very by the book, other than by being in 4. This measure with the, that's the first time we hear something that wakes the ear up to say, ooh, something is really going to be happening interesting in this arrangement. So, and that's not just Lady Gaga, improvising with it. The whole band is using that exact rhythm. I mean, there's percussion underneath it, marking the time, but it's definitely very obviously written that way. It was born that way. So there's that, and the use of the inversion here also is so classic here. The G flat, A flat, B flat in the bass. Now, I think Adam Neely might have called that an A flat minor. I have a hard time actually telling, because again, I'm just going to make the excuse that sometimes audio-wise it's not the best quality recording to go from. Maybe it is an A flat minor. I think, though, I'm hearing an F natural in the voicing that makes me want to call it a D flat with an A flat in the bass, just a plain triad. To me, that feels more in keeping with the style of what's happening. Either way would have worked, right? So this could have been an A flat minor chord, or it could be a D flat with an E flat major chord with an A flat in the bass. Either way, it's a passing chord to get us to this G flat in inversion. So we're using these inversions to create this stepwise bass line, and we're going to see that over and over again. And then it resolves to a 5 chord. Here, technically, and again, hats off to Adam for hearing this first. A friend of mine, Mark Patterson, also told me the same. If you listen really closely, there is a G flat subtly buried in the chord voicing there, so that we could call this D flat 7 sus also, just like we had this other D flat 7 sus. So that is there, but the melody note being F makes me a little reluctant to actually put that into the lead sheet, because if I did that, it would be really easy to play it in a way that just didn't really sound that good. So I will grant that it is in there in the original arrangement, but it's not as obviously prominent as it is in these other places. All right, now we're going to get some more of this bass motion, this use of inversions to create interesting bass motion. We know this 5 chord wants to go to 1, right? D flat wants to go to G flat, but instead of putting the G flat in root position, he puts a B flat in the bass. D flat, and then he walks down to it diatonically with a C flat. I told you there would be C flats. And then G flat with a B flat in the bass, right? D flat, C flat, B flat is our bass line there. And so it gives you the 5-1, but it does it using inversions in, again, a way that Bach has done a million times. It is totally hearkening back to this language, this really classic language. All right, this I'm calling a G flat chord. There's really not a chord. The whole band just plays that line in unison. So you could call that no chord. I think Adam might have done that too. And I started to do that, but I wanted it to show like it resolves to the G flat, because really that's the sound of it. It's the sound of a chord. Whether or not we hear a full chord, the melody note is outlining the chord. The melody is outlining that G flat triad. All right, so now we're going to come to actually the first significant harmonic variation that Michael Bearden adds here. All right, so this should have come back to the 1 chord, G flat, but Michael puts in an E flat minor. And I'm crediting Michael with this. He's credited apparently in the program notes that came out with the inauguration program. But I'm guessing that it was a collaboration between him and Lady Gaga, and so I don't know how much to credit her with and how much to credit with him with, but his name's on it. I'm going to credit him for the most part, but I know Lady Gaga's a fabulous musician, and I could easily believe that she basically wrote out a lead sheet and said, hey, orchestrate this. Or maybe she just said, write me something. I really don't know. So going to a 6 chord instead of a 1 chord, it's not an uncommon thing. They substitute for each other very freely because, right, the E flat minor has E flat, G flat, and B flat are the next 2 notes in it. Well, those are the first 2 notes of G flat major. 6 and 1 can substitute pretty freely, as can 3 and 1. But it definitely changes the sound, especially at the beginning of a phrase where we're really expecting the 1 chord, if you've heard this song before. So here, again, he's giving us this diatonic bass line using inversions. I'm going to keep referencing Adam as much as I can remember to, because he did a fabulous job, and if a lot of you have seen that, you might be wondering about the differences. I think Adam called this a D-flat triad, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe it is, but I'm pretty... Or he called it a G-flat with a D-flat in the bass, I think. But I think I hear the F, I think is what's going on. You'll have to listen to yourself and decide, but it's a diatonic chord with a D flat in the bass. I think I hear it as a B flat minor triad with maybe a non-chord tone in there. That's the other thing. Anytime you take an arrangement for a large ensemble and reduce it down to a lead sheet, well, the arrangement probably had all sorts of passing tones and everything going on, and you have to kind of decide whether that is a significant feature that you need to wrap into your chord symbol or not. Like, I already made that decision. I'm not going to worry about that 4th that was on that D flat 7 earlier. Similarly, I think I heard this as B flat minor with maybe some non-chord tones floating around in there. Not worth stressing about. Either way, it's diatonic, leading me to the 4 chord, C flat. Here again, Adam makes a pretty big deal about calling this G flat over C flat. And he's not wrong. That is very much the voicing that is in the arrangement. It's more or less that kind of sound. But if you think about it, the notes in a G flat chord, G flat and B flat, that's the 5th and the 7th, the major 7th of a C flat major 7 chord. I would argue that functionally that chord is just a 4 chord. It is not some sort of strange polychord. It's really just a 4 chord that happens to have some color to it, because the 5th of the G flat chord, D flat, is the 9th of a C flat major 7. So it's got some color to it, but I would much rather just give this thing a functional name. Call it the 4 chord, C flat major 7. But yes, the actual voicing that is used is very much like a G flat triad. There's a little more going on. There's a little da-da-da-da-da-da thing that happens in it. Listen to it. It's cool. Anyhow, that's a 4 chord. And now we're going to have harmony that's pretty much identical to what we had. We had By the Dawn's Early Light. Here we're going to have Through the Perilous Fight with the same harmonization, except here we don't necessarily need that inversion. So for C, By the Dawn's Early Light, we had E flat, D, E flat in the bass. Here we have C flat, B flat, E flat. So B flat was actually nice and close to the C flat already. They're just a half step apart. So by using this in root position, he actually got that to be stepwise. Here he kind of would have needed the inversion to make that. And again, I don't know. Technically, maybe there's someone else playing the root lower. I don't know. And maybe I'm imagining hearing the low root here. But it makes sense what I'm doing. A lot of what I'm doing, I say makes sense. So it makes sense whether or not it's exactly what was written. It's what my ears are hearing as a result. So here's the secondary dominant going to the 6, and then secondary dominant 2, 5. And now here again, he's using that same idea of resolving that 5 to 1, but putting that 1 in first inversion, like he did over here. Right, so that's the same sound here. It's the exact same thing harmonically. Now, what's happening harmonically here, again, is, by the way, what happened harmonically there with the E flat walking down to the C flat, that's like the jazziest thing that's happening here, or poppiest, or whatever. This is not Bach at all, or whoever is writing that kind of music, the Protestant hymns and so forth. It is not that sound at all. This is now coming to a much pop jazz type of sound. Now he's coming to a sound that you might actually start calling a gospel, and there's actually a much more gospel moment coming up. But this use of this line that we're going to hear, this bass line, B flat, C flat, D flat, D. Listen to this line. So it's changing octaves on me in the playback, so I'm going to have to sing it for you. B flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, D. By the way, I've recently learned that instead of having to sing B flat or C flat, I could sing the German version of that, which is Bess. Actually, it's not, though, because B flat is just B in German. But anyhow, D flat would be Des, and I could sing that if I wanted. But I'm not going to confuse you all with that any more than I just did. So we have this walking up, this B flat, walking up to C flat, D flat, and D. It's a really nice line. And there's something about it that feels classical in the way that it's using inversions to creating a stepwise line. But I have to say, this C flat diminished, resolving to this G flat with a D flat in the bass, that whole step motion isn't really the way diminished chords would that often work. Now, if I call this D diminished, and then say, oh, well, the D going down to D flat, sure. But the D's not in the bass. The bass definitely has this C flat in it. So or maybe you would, yeah, even if it was a D diminished, I would still want to call that a C flat. Yeah, there's something a little bit unique about the use of this diminished chord to get me there. It is moving by step. It's a passing diminished chord, but it's actually a little unusual. It's not the most common type of usage that I've ever seen. Let's put it that way. And then ending that phrase here on, again, a secondary dominant, right? This is B flat 7. It's the 3 chord, but it's a dominant 3 to get me to the 6 that follows. It's really a subtly nice sounding thing. That ascending line with the diminished chord, Adam calls it gospely. It is a bit gospely, but there's a much more gospely moment coming up later. Oops, I meant to start playback, sorry. And now that is going to resolve to 6. And at this point, again, there's not really that much of a chord coming down, but I'm going to call it 5-1 just so we can hear a 5-1. It's really the band, again, being mostly in unison, but there is a D flat that sounds in the bass. So I'm reading between the little lines a little bit to just call this 5-1, so I can have a 5-1. It's if you listen to it, you'll hear the G flat, you'll hear a D flat in the bass, and then you can ask yourself, what's really happening here? And you call it what you want. It's a 5-1 of some kind. Okay, now is when things get interesting rhythmically. All right, this phrase here, when Patricia did her analysis and her melodic transcription of it, she called this a 3/4 bar. The first three notes, rockets, red, glare, and called glare the downbeat. And then this then became a 5/4 bar. She is not wrong. If you focus mostly on the melody, that's absolutely what's happening. Rocket, because everywhere else when it was 4/4, they accomplished the 4/4 by holding that first note for 2 beats so that the final note of the phrase could be on beat 1, right? Here, that final note of the phrase is anticipated. It's on beat 4. So it's anticipated. It's a different rhythmic thing, right? So calling it 3/4 for Rockets Red as 3 and then glare as being the downbeat of the next measure is completely legitimate. I didn't do that because I hear that bass move down. Okay, so again we have this nice diatonic motion in the bass. G flat, A flat, B flat, G. And you hear this bass motion, this bass move, and the chord move here on what I'm calling the downbeat of the 4/4 measure. So what you hear when you listen to this is change. You hear the change there. So that to me helps establish that that really is the downbeat. That said, both Adam and my friend Mark Patterson tell me they hear the E flat change happen on beat 4 here, right on glare. They hear the change to E flat, but with a sus in it, with an A flat in there. To me, that's and they hear it with a flat 9. To me, that's basically still just the B flat minor 7 flat 5 chord. Maybe there's an E flat somewhere in there, but I don't really hear this B flat resolving to E flat until a beat after the word glare. That's how I hear it. You can listen. Leave me a comment if you want to tell me what I should be listening for to really hear that chord change. Maybe it's just that I need a better recording or better headphones. These are cheap. Anyhow, the same thing happens the next phrase. So let me play this here. 2, 3. Okay, so the same thing happens rhythmically in both of these phrases, right? You could look at them as 3 plus 5, and again 3 plus 5, but in both cases there is some sort of chord change that happens on the downbeat. And yeah, the bass doesn't just stay on G for this whole measure. I'm characterizing the measure this way because that's the most important motion I heard, was that there is something on 1 and that the G dominates. So I'm simplifying a complex orchestration a little bit here. So this B flat minor to E flat to A flat minor, right? That A flat minor, that's just the 2 chord in the key. So this B flat minor to E flat to A flat is another secondary dominant. It's a secondary 2/5 is the language I would use. B flat minor 7 flat 5 or B flat half diminished. That's the 2 chord in the key of A flat minor. E flat is the 5 chord in the key of A flat minor, and then we reach our A flat minor. So that's like 2, 5, 1 in A flat minor. So that's what's happening harmonically. It's more secondary dominant. Now we get to my favorite chord in the world and lots of people's favorite chord. This guy, the C flat minor. I'm sorry to call it C flat minor because I know C flat B, we might want to call it B. I'd rather read it as B probably, but from an analysis perspective, let's call it what it is. It's the 4 chord as a minor chord, right? In the key of G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat is the 4th note. Had we notated this in F sharp, yes, we would have been able to call it a B, but there's other things you wouldn't have liked about it, so it's not better. So this is the minor 4 chord, which is just this super duper powerful chord in a lot of music. I gush about this chord, the minor 4 chord. It is such a powerful chord, and here's what's like really a little bit unique about it. It's dramatic, and it comes off of this 2 chord, and that's a common situation. You might either have 4 going to minor 4 or 2 going to minor 4. 2 and 4 have that same relationship that 6 and 1 do. They share notes, right? A flat minor is 2, but A flat minor is A flat, C flat, E flat. Well, that C flat, E flat would be the root and 3rd of the 4 chord. C flat major would be C flat, E flat. So that's the 4 chord here and the 2 chord are largely the same chord. So whether you have 4 then our magic minor 4, or whether you have 2 and then our minor 4 chord, it's a similar sound of it getting darker because of the introduction of that minor 4 chord. The minor 4 chord is introducing scale degree flat 6, which is really the key to making this all work. That's this E double flat, and again, sorry for the spelling, but that's what flat 6 is in the key of G flat, right? Scale degree 6 is E flat. Flat 6 is E double flat. So that's how I'm going to spell it here, even though it's ugly. All right, so what I say that's really unique here is normally, well, often this chord is just used in root position, and it would have been fine to use in root position, and actually the bass line might have been stronger in root position. It could have gone A flat, B flat, C flat. However, that is already the melody. So he's already doubling the melody here. And maybe I'm wrong about the B flat and the bass here. Maybe I should listen more closely to that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. I'm pretty sure I listened and verified that. But he's doubling the melody in the bass, A flat to B flat. I think he didn't want to double it again. I think that's what's happening. I think his thinking was, if I put that C flat in the bass, I'm robbing this chord of a little of its power by having, because the melody doubled against the bass is not the world's most interesting thing. I often make chord substitutions just to get the root out from underneath the melody. I'm not going to change the melody, but I'll change the chord. If I see a place where the melody is the root of the chord, I will often change the chord so that that melody is no longer the root. It's a common little reharmonization trick. And I think that was part of his thinking here. He's like, man, I really don't want to stick the root underneath here, and especially given I've just had these roots here. So I think that's part of why he put the E double flat, the 3rd, in the bass there, even though it broke up the nice stepwise motion. But it also allowed him to do the same thing he did 2 measures earlier. Change. Here, change, right? He didn't want to change the chord, but he wanted to change the bass note. And so he wanted to change the bass note from that E double flat down to the B. And if we believe my interpretation of what's going on in the bass, it's a similar bass line. Ba-dum. And then here. Oh, I can't sing that D, can I? But it's from D down to C flat, right? Let me get myself a D because I'm not very good. D, C flat. It's a similar sliding down a minor 3rd, just like this sliding down from the B flat to the G was sliding down a minor 3rd. Here, the D down to the B is sliding down a minor 3rd. So I think that sound of that descending 3rd is part of what he was going for in there. All right, so we're coming up actually now to the most dramatic part of the song. Not that. That actually, this is the one spot where the drums stop. Everything has been totally in time. And I should mention also that some of the initial discussion that I saw, like on Twitter and so forth, was when Patricia posted her chart here and had all these time signature changes. Some people were saying, no, no, those aren't time signature changes. That's just rubato. But no, it wasn't rubato at all. The drum, there's this like military, well, it is a military band. It was the U.S. Army band, I think, is like doing this whole drum cadence thing throughout, totally in time. There's not a single fermata or anything remotely rubato until now. This is where the drums stop out. Proof through the night. It wasn't rubato in that spot, but that was the only time the drums drop out so far. And then later on, there's some stuff that maybe is a little rubato-ish. So here again, it's all about this. We've just come off the C flat minor, and we want to come to the one chord now, G flat, but he's putting it in an inversion with B flat in the bass. Again, just get that bass line. This is like such a beautiful bass line. It's stepwise almost everywhere except where it's lovely for it not to be. It's just a marvelously conceived bass line that's happening in this. And when I say bass line, I really mean, this is the part that, I don't know, probably tubas are playing. Who knows what other bass instruments he had at his disposal. I don't know what the orchestration, what the instrumentation was. So here it's really thinned out. All the percussion drops out, and really I don't think there's anything but some of the instruments playing the melody, and some of the instruments being or ba-da-dum. I don't think these are even full triads. I really think it's just those two lines coming together, but it's basically implying these triads. Maybe the third note is in there somewhere. In any case, it's implied enough. I notated it that way. All right, now again, we're going to have that 5 chord resolving to 1 by descending with the 7th in the bass so that we get to the 1 chord in first inversion. All right, so that spot, flag was still there. Here, to make the point, I really do have to jump to where that is in the recording. I'm just going to guess at where it is. All right, let's... Okay, so that, if you've ever heard the song, most of you have heard the song, even if you're not from the United States, you've heard it at the Olympics. That is not normally the climax of the piece at all. As Stephen Colbert very beautifully put it on his show, that line is not normally a cliffhanger. But based on what was going on historically, that was... I'm getting choked up. Usually I get choked up talking about the minor 4 chord. Now I'm getting choked up just talking about this, the way, what happened here, the way that was approached is, excuse me. That note was supposed to be down an octave, right? It should have been, prove through the night that our flag was still there. That's the normal way. So taking up an octave is already a very dramatic thing, but also what's happening rhythmically is very dramatic. Now, some people, and I can't remember if Adam did this, I think maybe Adam did, Mark Patterson, my friend who also gave me some feedback on this arrangement, also told me they hear this as still 3/4. So, prove through the night that our flag was still there. I'm singing without the dramatic stuff. But, so in other words, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, which would be maybe a type of hemiola rhythm. Okay, fine, it's the same rhythm regardless of which way you write it. Had the drums been continuing throughout that, doing something that clearly to me said that rest there, so flag is beat 3. If something had happened there on beat 4, or what I'm calling beat 4 in 6/4, if something had happened significantly enough there to say, hey, there's a beat 1 here that the melody is working against I'd absolutely call it 3/4. I didn't really hear that happen. So to me, it really just feels like a 6/4 measure, but whatever. It's changing up the rhythm because, right, we've had 4/4, now we've had 3/4, and now we're having something that's just different. It's neither of those things. It's not a straight 3/4 like this was, the Proof Through the Night, nor is it the straight 4/4 of the rest of the piece up until that point. So it's its own dramatic thing. Still there. Okay, I can't do it like Lady Gaga does. But it's this dramatic point where she's up there pointing to the flag, which, by gosh, is still on top of the Capitol building. So, anyhow, very dramatic thing there. And then it's like race to the finish from there. So this is just the one chord. 1, 1, 1, 4, 4, except with the bass, again, doing interesting bassy kinds of things. Not bassy like Count Basie. Bassy is in the quality of bass. The bass is going B flat, G flat, B flat. So, 3, 1, 3 in the G flat chord. And then we have our C flat, 1, 3. And then we have a little secondary dominant. We have that E flat 7 over G going to A flat minor, as we've had 100 times, well, 3 times before in the piece. That secondary dominant, 5 of 2 going to 2. And then we have, so when I said there's another gospel-y moment coming up, this is the one. This sequence here. So we have A flat minor, G flat with a B flat in the bass, A flat minor with a C flat in the bass, A flat 7 with a C in the bass, D flat 7, and again with the sus thing. And that sus is this time part of the melody. That wave, that G flat to F, that's part of the melody. Every arrangement has to have that in it, pretty much. So that line, that A flat, B flat, C, D flat, that's the quintessential kind of gospel walk up there to get you from 2 to 5. Often maybe this chord here that I have as a secondary dominant, well, that Michael has, because I'm pretty sure that really is what he really has, an A flat in that voicing. And there's a G flat in the melody, so I'm going to call it A flat 7. But often this might just be a C diminished chord. So you might have a diminished chord in this position. So it's basically sharp 4 diminished, getting you to that 5. In this case, though, it's more clearly A flat 7. But again, C diminished, C, E flat, G flat, and A flat 7 is A flat, C, E flat, G flat. They're the same chord, 5 and 7, because C is the 7 chord in the key. Well, no, I'm sorry, I'm in the key of D flat, which is where we're going. A flat would have been the 5, but C would have been the 7. These are interchangeable the same way 1 and 6 are, the same way 2 and 4 are. All right, so now again, we're going to have that D flat resolve down, D flat resolving to G flat, and again using the 7th in the bass, walking down so we can get the 3rd in the bass here. So we get that D flat, C flat, B flat, and now here again we get some nice mostly just diatonic stuff. So, yeah, that's all just 1 chords and 5 chords, and that's pretty much all that's happening. Again, this D flat over A flat, is it that, or is it A flat minor? Not an important distinction to me. It's diatonic. It is what it is. This is where, when she sings it, she actually breaks up the word land. I have a theory about that. I'll play you that too, since now I'm playing music. Oops, too far. Right? Land of the free is what she sings, but better. That's an odd thing to do, right? To break up the word land like that. So first of all, that doesn't normally happen in this piece because it's usually in 3 and not in 4. But we're back to 4 now. We're back to 4. I suspect the arrangement was written, so probably maybe it was written that way so there could be an extra breath to be able to hold free. Um, So maybe to make sure there was enough breath to get there, because the arrangement had a break in there too. The other instruments have a little break. It was clearly written to have that break. But my theory is that it might have been written so that it was supposed to go, land of the free. Maybe that's what was written in the arrangement. Logically, that makes sense. Land of the free. That would have totally made sense logically. But I think vocally it just didn't really click with her to sing it that way. And so I think that's why she decided to break it up the way she did. That's just my theory. In any case, just about done here. So we reach that free, which is just that one chord in first inversion. All right, so now here we're on that final home stretch. And I'm going to point out that now we're going to get that minor 4 chord again. And here again, it's a minor 4 chord C flat minor with the E double flat, with its third in the bass, because it's trying to get to a G flat in second inversion. So we want that E flat, D flat in the bass. So again, he's not giving me a C flat in the bass. He's giving me an E double flat in the bass because that moves very nicely to that D flat. So we have minor 4 to 1, except our 1 is in second inversion, which at this point, 2 bars from the end, is exactly when you normally expect a second inversion 1 chord. Second inversion 1 chord, 5, 1 would be the normal thing to have here. But it's not what happens here. And here, one more time, I'll listen to the recording, and then I'm going to point something out. That minor 4 chord is a powerful chord. It's a great chord. Minor 4 chords are a beautiful thing. I love them. I start hearing them everywhere. It's easy to get fooled into thinking there's more minor 4 than there actually is in this last phrase, though. So let's listen to the rest of it. Well, let me back it up so you hear. And the is the minor 4 chord. Okay, so the home of the... First of all, yes, she rushes. Anticipates, maybe, is the more charitable word. She sings of the, like a whole beat ahead of the rest of the band. I'm quite sure that what was written was 4/4, and she's just ahead of the beat on purpose, nerves, conscious choice, accident, who knows what. To me, this is almost certainly what was written because it is what the orchestra is playing, or band. It's like this military band, but there's, I think, strings happening in there also. So it's I don't know exactly what the instrumentation is, as I said. So this chord, I'm hearing it as an A flat minor with a D flat in the bass. But several people, in talking about this, including maybe Adam, is hearing there a minor 4 chord in here. Between that chord on of and this, what I'm calling D flat 7 with a flat 9, people are hearing minor 4 chords in there that I don't think are there. So you can listen to it yourself, but I go to the piano and I'm trying to work out exactly what the notes are, because conceptually, when I listen to that passage, I instantly think I'm hearing a minor 4 chord in here because I know the sound of a minor 4 chord and I feel it. And I think it's because the crucial note of the minor 4 chord is that E double flat, right? Minor 4, the C flat is C flat, E double flat, G flat. Call it D if you want, but whatever. That note, that E double flat, is the note that makes that a minor 4 chord as opposed to a major 4. Well, this chord here, D flat 7, flat 9, has that E double flat. But there's also a very clear F in the voicing. In fact, I think what I hear is a harp playing a G flat to an F. A G flat on this chord and an F there. And then I also hear E flat to E double flat here in the instrumentation. So that's why I'm calling this chord what I am, because I'm hearing those notes as being really crucial to the instrumentation. So even though there's an overall sound that kind of resembles this minor 4 chord because of that D double flat, I cannot grant it here. I cannot say that sound happened. Similarly, when we reach that final chord here, a lot of people are hearing that as a minor 4 chord, including Adam. I think he's wrong. He was in a hurry. I think if he listens to it again, he'll go, oh, that's that one. But in any case, this chord is not a minor 4 chord. It is this chord that I have here. It is a G chord. It is the flat 2 chord. Every jazz musician I know, one person, I think it was Will Swindler, another friend of mine, posted something that he laughed out loud when he heard that chord, because it is such a jazz cliche to end a song this way, flat 2. And this is part of that thing that I mentioned of making a root in the melody more interesting. It ends on a G flat. By the way, Mario. Don't let me forget Mario. It ends on a G flat, and normally there would just be a G flat chord there. But there's a thing that we sometimes do to prolong this, to say, well, we don't want to land on the 1 chord yet. So a classical thing you might do is put the 4th chord there. Let that G flat have a C flat underneath it. Putting a C flat minor is also totally fits, and that would have been in keeping. And that C flat minor would have had an E double flat or a D natural. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is this chord here, G, technically A double flat, but at that point I drew the line. I'm not going to call that an A double flat chord because I don't have to. So I called it G. It's a G, B, D. Think of that D as E double flat if you want. It's the same note that makes the minor 4 chord what it is. But a minor 4 chord would have had, C flat, E double flat. It would not have had the G natural. The G natural is what gives me this sound. Now, I guess you could say it's a minor 4 chord, a C minor chord with an added G. It's just a different sound. It's the sound of flat 2 resolving to 1. It's a jazz cliche. The only thing that's at all different about it is the bass instruments definitely drone on that G flat. A more common jazz ending would have been this. Going from G to G flat. That would have been the more common kind of jazz cliche ending, but I think here I hear the G flat droning throughout, so I'm just going to call it this. I mentioned Mario. A lot of people also hear that happening. They hear that same sound of arriving on the final note, hearing some chord that has a E double flat, has that flat 6 scale degree, and their ear goes to something that I guess Mario is not part of my experience. I mean, Super Mario Brothers, right? Video game. I was done with video games before that one came out. Space Invaders, the last one I remember playing. So I don't know the Mario theme, but I gather it involves a flat 6 chord going to a flat 7 chord going to 1. Okay, it's a common cliche. It way predates Mario, but a lot of people hear that sound. They hear that sound that includes that scale degree flat 6. And instead of hearing minor 4, they hear Mario, because Mario has a flat 6. It's an actual E major chord. It would be E major, F sharp major, or it would be D major, E major, F sharp. I don't know. See, I don't even know the dang theme. In any case, it's not the Mario theme. I promise it is not the Mario theme. It is not that. It is this flat 2 going to 1. It is not a flat 6 chord. It is not a D chord. It is not a E double flat chord, whatever. It is not a flat 6 chord. It is this flat 2 chord. It's a different cliche. So the flat 6 resolving to flat 2 resolving to 1 is a good jazz cliche ending. Flat 6 to flat 7 to 1, perfectly good ending also. It ain't that one. Minor 4 resolving to 1, another perfectly good ending, but it ain't that one. It's this one. So that's my analysis there. It's I'm getting as deep as I can into the details of what's happening, because really harmonically, let's just do a quick review here. So rhythmically, yeah, it's interesting. It's in 4/4. It has this little packet of 3/4 here, and then this thing that's neither 3 nor 4 exactly, and then it's 3, and then we've got these, this fermata thing on wave, maybe a little fermata here, maybe. So maybe these measures I could have called something other than 5/4 and 6/4. Anyhow, that's what's going on rhythmically. Harmonically, The language is very straightforward. There's a lot of interesting chords, but I can categorize everything in just a handful of points. One is beautiful use of inversions, diatonic chords in inversion to create interesting bass line. Things like this, that passage, or this one. You know, these chords moving with the bass line using inversions. So just a classic use of that. Diatonic chords with inversions to create interesting bass lines. Beautiful use of that as a basic technique. Beautiful uses of secondary dominance, that B flat going to E flat minor, the A flat going to D flat. Is there any other secondary dominance? It's really those two over and over again. Is there another one? It's just E flat going to A flat minor. Yeah, so yeah, that's the other one. E flat 7 going to A flat minor. So the 5 of 2 going to 2, 5 of 6 going to 6, and 5 of 5 going to 5. Hopefully I said those right, and I think that's pretty much all of them. 5 of 6 going to 6. Yeah, I said that already. So secondary dominants are used, you know, exactly the way they're supposed to be used. A couple of really beautiful uses of minor 4 chords. That minor 4 chord there on the bursting in air is just really poignant. And then, you know, minor 4 chord that shows up in the no, I'm sorry, not that one. That's not a minor 4 chord. Oh, here it is. And that just one beat is all it took. It wasn't the big long hanging on it version. It wasn't the big super dramatic minor 4 chord. This was our dramatic minor 4. This was just a little one to say, I can use minor 4 chords, dang it. When I want to use a minor 4 chord, I'm going to use a minor 4 chord. So uses of the minor 4 chord. And really, that's what's happening, the little jazz ending thing. I guess when I talked about secondary dominance, we actually had a secondary 2-5, right? 2-5 in the key of A flat minor, which is the 2. So that's basically what he's playing with here. We had that one other diatonic in an inversion thing that I mentioned sounds a little more pop jazzy than it does classical, but as far as the technique goes, it's in that first category. It's diatonic chords with inversions to create smooth bass lines. So we have that, we have secondary dominance, we have that powerful minor 4 chord when it shows up, and then we have just that tiny little jazzism at the end. That's what's going on harmonically, so it's not a lot of different devices. It's not a lot of really complicated things happening. They're just assembled I think, astonishingly well. The overall point that I'd make is coming back to what I said before. There is so much going on in this piece, in this arrangement, both rhythmically and harmonically, and just in terms of what happens with the drama of Flag Was Still There, the way that's not just an interesting rhythmically, not just interesting harmonically, but texturally, the fact that it's the high point, literally, right, the high note, the long held out note, the most dramatic point of the orchestration. So that's a unique feature of this piece. But yeah, so rhythmically, it's got these interesting things going on. Harmonically, it's just really by the book, but done incredibly well. Rhythmically, those things, all these time signature changes, many people were barely aware of it. Maybe people said, hey, I think it's in 4, and then stopped noticing. My big clue, as I mentioned, was the proudly we hailed, that something was interesting. And then this rocket's red glare, oh my gosh, there's extra beats there, right? That caught my ear. But mostly, this did not come off as a super showy arrangement, right? It didn't have a lot of flashy stuff going on, not a lot of vocal gymnastics. She sang it really quite straight till maybe a little bit of melismas at the end, but she sang it quite straight, and yet it was really powerful and really unique and different from the traditional arrangements of this. And so I can maybe contrast that with a version where it's just, hey, they're doing a pop song in 4 and they're singing it like a gospel pop song and doing all the flashy stuff for that. That's a fine thing too. That's how I would look at the Whitney Houston version from the Super Bowl. But this is its own world. It's really living in the space of being a pretty classic arrangement, performed in a pretty straightforward way, but with just these interesting twists of rhythm, interesting twists of harmony, and that one cliffhanger on Flag Was Still There that just make this, again, a really remarkable arrangement. So I hope you've enjoyed this really pretty in-depth look at this, and if you have any little bones you want to pick with me about why I called this that, or you think I should have called that this, let me know about it. But I hope you've enjoyed this and learned something from it. Thank you. Mark Sabatella, the Mastering MuseScore School.